Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Fix YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to look at the top 5 transfer targets for Game Week 6. Let's do this. Starting with arguably the most obvious player, or the obvious pick of the 5, is Sarr, who's just scored 15 points. I know a lot of people went for him this week, potentially bringing him in for Benrahma, and although Benrahma scored 10 points, even if you took a hit, you're still up 1 point by bringing in Sarr, and it's always nice to have a player that gets multiple returns in a game week, especially when they've got such low ownership, but his ownership is increasing quite quickly, so he's already at 6.1 million, he's already had one rise. It looks like he could have a double rise this week. I'd be very surprised if it's a triple rise. It looks like we've got a maximum of a double rise, but he is still being transferred in at a rate which would likely lead to him being 6.2 million before the start of game week 6. So if you're someone that likes to bring in players early and you don't mind being a little bit aggressive with your transfers and you don't want to wait, maybe bring him in sooner rather than later. Doesn't look like he's going to rise in price tonight, so I wouldn't panic about that, but he could rise in price before the game week 6 deadline. You can see on the left, there are a lot of players, like popular players, being taken out this week in the midfield area. So I assume a lot of you guys watching this will be taking out some of your midfielders. I think people are a bit sick and tired of Torres. Yes, he got that haul, but then a couple of blanks, and obviously the rotation, the games coming up for City aren't great. So a lot of people taking Torres out. Bruno, again, people I think are taking him out so they can get Ronaldo and Lukaku in their teams. Jack Grealish, Diogo Jota, a lot of these popular players being transferred out. So we are looking at a few midfielders in today's video. What I would say with Sarr is if you were going to bring him in, obviously doing so before the Norwich fixture was ideal, because obviously the Norwich fixture is basically the easiest fixture you can probably have this season. That being said, I don't necessarily think the fixtures coming up are still too bad for Watford. Newcastle and Leeds in the next 2 are the really appetizing ones, especially Newcastle at home in game week 6. Liverpool and Everton aren't great fixtures, but obviously Liverpool's a pretty terrible fixture, really. It's one of the most difficult you could have this season. But Everton, Southampton and Arsenal after that, I don't think are like difficult fixtures particularly. Like, they're not ideal for Watford, and I'm not expecting Watford to score 3 or 4 goals in each game. But you could see them getting 1 goal in each of those games, and if it's going to be someone, it's likely to be probably Dennis or Sarr. So I do still like him coming up. What I would say is after game week 11, their fixtures do turn for the worst once again. So if you're not going to bring him in this week, I think you've probably missed the boat. I'd still think it's not too late, but if you're going to bring Sarr in, I would do it this week. Otherwise, I'm not sure that I'd want to go for him. And if I was on wildcard, just because of how difficult their fixtures are coming up after this run and the fact that this run isn't that great, I think there are potentially some better long-term options, which we're going to get onto in a bit. Anyway, I still think he's a good option for this week. And you can see the underlying statistics have improved, because we said apart from that first half against Aston Villa in game week 1, he hasn't performed like that amazingly. But since then, he started to up it, and that last game's obviously really bumped up his underlying statistics. So 5.5 expected FPL points per 90 over the first 5 game weeks. He's had an average of 6.4 touches in the box per 90, and that's what we love. We love that involvement. You want the players that you have, even the cheap players, to be getting into the box as much as possible, to be involved in the positions that allow them to get those assists and to get those goals. His expected assists have actually been pretty poor, 0.1, so he's not really creating a lot for his teammates. But his non-penalty expected goals has gone right up to 0.38. I think it was 0.22 last week per 90. So he obviously got a lot of chances in the game against Norwich, and yes, he won't play against Norwich every week, but that's still very promising. And he's now got 0.48 non-penalty expected goals plus expected assists per 90. So he's averaging an expected return every couple of games, which is really good for a £6 million player. You can see by his touch map, we compared it in a video a couple of days ago. It looks pretty similar to Salah's. And again, I'm not saying he's as good as Salah. He's nowhere near. The underlying statistics aren't as good either. But he's getting in those positions where he sticks to the right wing, but he also cuts in quite a lot. And he is getting into sort of the edge of the inside of the box. So fixtures in the immediate short term are very nice. The underlying statistics are pretty good as well. The touch map's pretty good. He's passing the eye test. So I think there are definitely worse options than Sarr this week. I'm definitely tempted by him. But I think if you're not bringing him in this week, you've probably missed the boat. And if you're on wildcard, I think there are better options, which we're going to get onto now. So someone who I think is probably a slightly better long-term pick and who actually has better underlying statistics than Sarr is Conor Gallagher. And he hasn't exactly gone under the radar because he's turned those underlying statistics into attacking returns. He's doing very well for the start of the season. He's already had 1 price rise, but he's still only at 6.1% at the time of recording. And he's only been brought in by 81,000 managers this week. In comparison, that's under half of the amount of managers that are brought in as Sarr. So definitely still going under the radar slightly. What I would say is the next 6 fixtures are a bit of a mixed bag. You've got Brighton and Leicester and Arsenal in the next 3. they're very, very difficult fixtures to predict because each of those teams have had moments in the past where they've defended well, moments where they've defended quite poorly. I'd actually say Brighton's the most difficult fixture there out of the three. Leicester have looked very, very poor early on, and I do expect them to start turning that around, but they've really struggled defensively. Arsenal struggled to start with, but they look like they've started to find some form. They're defending a little bit better now that the fixtures have started to turn. But those next three, I wouldn't say are particularly difficult. Then you've got Newcastle at home, which is one of the best fixtures you can have really this season in game week 9. Obviously, City in 10's not ideal. Wolves in 11's an okay fixture. But then, as I said, after that, their fixtures become really, really nice. So if you're looking for a long-term hold, or perhaps you're playing your wildcard this week and you just want a cheap budget midfielder that you can play some weeks, bench some weeks, and you can hold long-term, I think Gallagher might be your man. Underlying statistics-wise, 6.81 expected FPL points per 90, blows Sarr out of the water. 4.25 touches in the box isn't as good as Sarr, but that's because he's playing that number 8 role, so he does play a little bit deeper than you would expect like a winger to be. Expected assists-wise, 0.22 is pretty good. Nothing amazing, but it's that 0.6 and non-penalty expected goals per 90. So he's averaging a goal, an expected goal, more than once every 2 games. So very, very impressive. That puts his non-penalty expected goals and expected assists at 0.82 per 90, which is one of the best in the league. He's performing so, so well, and he's been very consistent across the first 5 game weeks. As you can see by his touch map again, most of his touches are central, but he's got that little bit out on the right because he gets in that position, sort of similar to like what we've seen with like Gerrard in the past and De Bruyne, where they get out to that right and they whip in those really, really nice crosses as well. He takes a lot of the set pieces, again, as you can see by the touch map. Both corners, there's a red mark in both corner flags, which means he's taking all of the corners for the team. So he's on set pieces. He looks very, very nailed. I think Vieira's getting the best out of him in that box-to-box position. I think if you're looking for a long-term midfielder, I do think Gallagher's probably the best option in the league at the moment. And being at 5.6 million only makes it that much better. Right, time for a mega differential in Mohamed Elyounoussi of Southampton, who at the time of recording this is at 0.1%, and he's been brought in by 867 managers. Not even 1,000 managers have brought in Elyounoussi, so going massively under the radar. And I do think that potentially too much. I think he's being overlooked by so many managers just because he hasn't had that many attacking returns yet. Potentially because he's playing in a slightly weaker Southampton squad than we used to, or potentially the fact that he didn't start the first few games and he's only played the last couple. So there's a few reasons that perhaps you wouldn't consider him, but I'm going to try and argue that I think there are worse differentials to go for. And if you're looking for a budget enabler in your wild card, or you want to bring in someone long-term again, and you don't fancy Gallagher, or perhaps you've already got Gallagher and you don't fancy Sarr, I do think Elyounoussi is a great option. Fixtures-wise, once again, the next 2 are a bit difficult. Wolves and Chelsea aren't great, but I would argue that Wolves, whilst the underlying data's been great, they haven't defended that well, and we saw that Brentford pulled them apart, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Southampton score. So I don't think it's that difficult. Obviously, game week 7's a terrible fixture. Chelsea away is arguably the most difficult fixture you can have in the league this season from an attacking perspective, so that's not a great fixture. But after that, you can see Leeds, Burnley, Watford, Villa, and similar to what we've just discussed with Gallagher, Southampton's nice fixtures continue after that as well. So if you're looking for a long-term hold, again, I do really like Elyounoussi. And his statistics, again, are much better than Ismaila Sarr's. They're better than Damari Gray's. They're better than these midfielders that are already returning points. They're not quite as good as Conor Gallagher's, but they do compare definitely. So 5.83 expected FPL points per 90, 4.67 touches in the box, which is better than Conor Gallagher. Expected assist is quite low at 0.11, but his non-pen expected G is higher, his expected goals, than a lot of strikers in the league. Like, it's comparable to like Bamford and Jimenez. So definitely worth considering. He's getting a lot of shots off, which is really nice. Some in the box, obviously some outside the box as well. So he's averaging an expected return more than once every couple of games, which is really, really nice. You can see, because he hasn't played as many minutes as some of the other players, his touch map's a bit all over the place, and it's difficult to start looking at trends and to see where most of his touches are. What I would say is he's a bit of everywhere, which is nice. He's quite a lively player, but there are a lot of touches in the box you can see already. So it'll be very interesting over game week 6 and 7 to make sure, number 1, that he's nailed, and number 2, that he does keep getting those touches in the box and getting into some good positions. It is a massive punt, Elyounoussi. I'm not saying that it isn't, but for me, if you're looking for a budget enabler, his underlying statistics, again, are better than the likes of Damari Gray. So I think you could definitely do worse. And I just like the fact that long-term, his fixtures are really, really nice. So Gallagher and Elyounoussi, some really nice long-term differential budget enablers. But if you're looking for someone over the immediate short-term, Ismaila Sarr might be your man. So the first three players we looked at were all midfielders. The second two are going to be forwards. And I'm actually picking a player that I did look at last week when we compared him to Neil Maupay, but I want to look at him again because he looked really good as well. And I recommended that the two best £6.5 million forwards that you should consider for the upcoming game week in game week 5 were Neil Maupay and Alan Saint-Maximin, and both players scored, which obviously shows that this is the best FPL series on YouTube and that you should listen to the players that I'm recommending. But obviously Maupay's was a penalty, Saint-Maximin's was open goal. I don't know whether you think that's a good thing that Maupay's was a penalty or you think you don't want your striker to rely on a penalty. But either way, Saint-Maximin looked so good against Leeds and his underlying statistics continue to tick along really nicely as well. The next 4 fixtures I actually think are pretty good. Watford, Wolves, Tottenham and Palace, a bit of a mixed bag. Like, I think Wolves have defended really well, as have Palace. Tottenham obviously traditionally do defend relatively well, but they've struggled this season. So I wouldn't be surprised to see 2 or 3 attacking returns over the next 4 for Saint-Maximin. Obviously then game week 10 and 11 aren't great fixtures, Chelsea at home and Brighton away, but long-term Newcastle's fixtures are really good again. So I think, again, Saint-Maximin's like a long-term hold, similar to the likes of Gallagher and Elyounoussi. I think you could bring him in this week, either on your wildcard or as part of a transfer, and keep him long-term. I definitely think there are worse options. And the great thing is that he's a lot cheaper than the likes of Danny Ings, Bamford, Jimenez, etc. So you're saving some money as well, which is really, really nice. Underlying statistics are very, very good, considering, like, we think Saint-Maximin's one of those players that just looks really lively and looks great on the eye test but won't ever deliver. But the underlying statistics have been pretty solid. 4.5 to expected FPL points per 90. Again, is better than the likes of Bamford and Jimenez. Really, really strong. Touches in the box at 5.2. Considering he's not an out-and-out natural striker, yes, he's been playing in that number 9 role in the absence of Callum Wilson. And even when Wilson's there, he does support him. But considering he's not an out-and-out number 9... 5.2 touches in the box is really, really promising. Expected assists of 0.24, expected goals of 0.25. So he's equally creative as much as he is a goal threat. And that is great that your striker can get many routes to points. Now, obviously, you want them to be more of a goal threat than a creative threat. You want them to score more goals and assists because they get more points for that and more bonus points. But the fact that he has 2 routes to goals, it's not only goals, is absolutely a great thing. And that puts his non-pen expected goals and expected assists per 90 at 0.49. So he's basically averaging an expected return every couple of games. The touch map looks really, really great. He's absolutely everywhere. He's so talismanic for Newcastle. Every time they get the ball, they look for him. As long as he can stay fit, I do think he'll tick along really nicely this season. And I think he could hit sort of 150, 160 points this season. Again, if he does stay fit. I think there are definitely worse options, and you can at least take a punt on him for Watford and Wolves. If he gets injured, you take him out, and if he continues to look good, he'll probably continue to rise up to the likes of 7 million. So I think he's a great option. I recommended him last week. I'm going to recommend him again this week, probably for the last time in a while, and I think you could do a lot worse than Saint-Maximin at 6.7 million. I bet you didn't expect to see me recommend Jamie Vardy in this video. Not spoken about by any YouTubers on Twitter, on any of the social media platforms, by anyone this season. Yes, he's at 11.3%, but I think that's a lot of people that don't really focus much on FPL and just pick a team based on historical numbers. I don't think a lot of the serious engaged managers, a lot of you watching will probably own Jamie Vardy. If you do, you're probably slightly ahead of the curve because he's continued to perform. He continues to score goals. No matter what, Jamie Vardy finds a way to get FPL points. And the next few fixtures for Leicester are so good. And I quite like Jamie Vardy either as an alternative to Lukaku or Ronaldo, or potentially if like you want Ronaldo, Lukaku and Salah, but you just don't have quite enough budget to get all 3 premiums, you could go like Ronaldo, Vardy and Salah, or Lukaku, Vardy and Salah. I think Vardy is starting to live up to his price tag of 10.4 million at the moment. We said it might have been a bit too much at the start of the year, but he is ticking along quite nicely. And the next 2 fixtures I think are definitely worth taking a punt on, especially when captaincy for the next 2 is a bit up in the air. Like, I don't think there's a clear-cut captain for this week. You could say Ronaldo against Villa is the clear-cut one, but Vardy against Burnley at home, I'm not going to lie, I think if I own Vardy, I would definitely be very tempted to captain him here. So Burnley at home and Palace away in the next 2. Again, we know that Palace have defended quite well this season, but I would fancy Vardy against Burnley and Palace in the next 2. Man United, Vardy does score against Manchester United. We know Man United have their frailties at the back, so I don't think that's a particularly tough fixture for Vardy. And then Brentford, Arsenal and Leeds, and 3 after that, again, aren't that difficult. So you could hold him across the next 6, or you could just take a punt over the next 2. And the main reason that I do like Vardy, as I said, he's $1 million or over $1 million cheaper than Lukaku and over $2 million cheaper than Ronaldo. So if you've got a poor team budget, or you just can't quite stretch to Ronaldo and Lukaku, but you want a premium-ish forward, there's definitely worse options than Vardy, and he's still on penalties as well. I could easily see 3 or 4 attacking returns over the next couple for him. underlying statistics are really strong. You can see Fix love him. Fix in their algorithm really favour him. 31 projected points over the next 6 game weeks is absolutely brilliant. One of the best in the league. Expected FPL points per 90 at 5.04. Again, so the underlying data suggests that he has been performing really well. 5.2 touches in the box. We know Jamie Vardy's a fox in the box. Expected assist-wise, he's not been very creative. I think if he were to have Elyounoussi up top with him, and again, Leicester might switch to a formation that allows Elyounoussi and Daka up top alongside him, I think his creative threat would be higher. He's just not got that same support around him. But his non-penalty expected goals is always really good. 0.43 is very, very strong, which puts him, again, an expected return every couple of games. And that's without penalties. And we know that Jamie Vardy will probably slot the penalty away if he gets it. His touch map's a bit funny. You can see Leicester have conceded a lot, hence the fact that most of his touches have been on the kickoff spot. But you can see there is a little cluster just to the left of in the centre of the box as well. So I know this is quite a strange suggestion because there are so many good premiums at the moment. But the reason I've suggested this is I think he's a genuine captaincy option in game week 6. I think the fixtures over the next 6 are pretty good. And if you can't quite stretch to Lukaku and Ronaldo, I do really like Vardy over the next few game weeks. And I definitely think he's at least worth considering in your teams. So guys, there you have it. Those are 5 players that I think it is worth targeting ahead of game week 6. A few obvious choices in there, but also a nice few differentials as well. If you are enjoying this weekly series and you're just enjoying the content in general on this channel, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to the channel and enable push notifications. It really helps to support the channel and we're really enjoying bringing you daily content. Also, if you want to check any of these things for yourself, you can head over to the Fantasy Football Fix website and do so. If you want to look at some of these touch maps or heat maps, you can do that for yourself as well. And it should take your game to the next level and hopefully improve your overall rank as well. But until next time, guys, thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.